The Old Testament lesson today is taken from Genesis, the 45th chapter. Then Joseph could not control himself before all those who stood by him. And he cried, "Make everyone go out from me." So no one stayed with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept aloud, so that the Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard it. And Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed at his presence. So Joseph said to his brothers, "Come near to me, I pray you." And they came near, and he said, "I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves, because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land for these 2 years, and there are yet 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. And God sent me before you to preserve you, a remnant on the earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. And he has made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord of all of his house, and ruler over the land of Egypt. Make haste and go up to my father and say to him, 'Thus says your son Joseph, God has made me lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not tarry. You shall dwell in the land of Goshen. You shall be near me, you and your children, and your children's children, and your flocks, your herds, and all that you have. And there I will provide for you. For there are yet 5 years of famine to come, lest you and your household and all that you have come to poverty. And now your eyes see, and the eyes of my brother Benjamin see, that it is my mouth that speaks to you. You must tell my father of all my splendor in Egypt, and of all that you have seen. Make haste and bring my father down here." Then he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept upon his neck. And he kissed all his brothers and wept upon them. And after that, his brothers talked with him. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. When Kansas sought to become a state, they had been through much travail and bloodshed, for in the territory of Kansas there were both pro-slavery and anti-slavery factions. There had been vicious battles and conflicts between various groups in that state. Finally, as the anti-slavery groups conquered, they entered the Union as a state, and they adopted this phrase as their motto, the state motto, the Latin phrase ad astra per aspera, which means to the stars through many scars. To the stars through many scars, through much suffering, through many difficulties. And this motto, this phrase, is truly the story of God's people, beginning with the very first people of God in the Old Testament, Jacob and his sons and Joseph. This is the story of the people of God even up till now. The sufferings of the patriarchs who finally entered into their blessings, the sufferings of the prophets, the sufferings of the apostles and the martyrs. They suffered before they entered into glory. I had a friend who had an appointment preached in Garland, North Carolina, and he had 3 churches there. And there's a little community there, and they have a sign. It's called Hell, North Carolina. Yes. And so John would tell us, when he moved there, he said, I have to go through hell every Sunday morning and get to church. And he did. He had to go to hell to get to church. And boy, isn't it true? This motto sums it all up for us. This was Joseph's story. The story par excellence of how man makes choices and moral decisions, but how all of those take place within the context of the sovereign will of God. Joseph, his brothers were going to cast him into a pit where he would die. Then some nomads come along, some Bedouins. They get another idea pops into their head. They're making choices, but God has a way of influencing things. Those Bedouins came by at that time, perhaps because the weather held them up for a day. Whatever the reasons are, in the greater scheme of things, in the big picture, God controls these things. So then he is, instead of being left to die, he is sold into slavery, down and out, but he becomes a success in Potiphar's house. But then he is falsely accused, cast into the dungeon. Fate would have it, or God's sovereignty would have it, that there is one of the servants of Pharaoh there who has been accused of something, and he has a dream that troubles him. Joseph's there. Joseph can interpret the dream. Tells the man he will be acquitted of this crime and returned to his master's house. And then when it happens, later on when the Pharaoh has a troubling dream, then this servant is reminded of Joseph, and through those circumstances he rises to be the ruler of Egypt. And then the famine comes, and through these circumstances his own family comes, and they are saved through this. And Joseph says this to his brothers: "You meant it for evil." But then he says God meant it or intended it for good. So they made their choice, then God's sovereignty surrounds that choice.